Thanks for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Lori Johnson.
And I'm Mark Martin. Fresh concerns of domestic terrorism in the heartland. U.S. officials are stepping up security today after an al-Qaeda group called on Muslims to attack malls in America. It's the same group that launched a deadly attack on a mall in Kenya just 2 years ago. Dale Hurd has the story.
Security officials are urging Americans to be vigilant after al-Qaeda's Somali affiliate Al-Shabaab released an hour-long video Saturday calling on homegrown extremists to attack Western malls, including those in the UK and Canada. Here in the U.S., the video urges violence at the country's biggest shopping center, the Mall of America. It's the first time the group has threatened American shopping malls. Some maulers said the threat would not disrupt their routines.
I feel like it's just a fact of life these days with the threat.
A little hesitation this morning, but we talked about it with the kids, and everyone was fine with staying. So we decided to stay.
Al-Shabaab is the group responsible for the September 2013 assault on the Westgate Mall in Nairobi, Kenya, that left 67 people dead. Although no specific plot has been identified, Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson warned Americans to be alert.
We're in a new phase now, and I'm afraid that this most recent video release reflects that. The reason I think we're all concerned about this is because it encourages independent actors who could strike with very little notice.
Also on the terror front, a desperate search in the Middle East for 3 British schoolgirls, all teenagers, who authorities say ran away from their homes and their families to join ISIS. The families of the missing girls, last seen here in London's Gatwick Airport, are pleading with them to come home.
Please come home. Mom needs you more than anything in the world.
Get back home. We miss you. We cannot stop crying.
Hundreds of young women from around the world are believed to have flocked to ISIS to be brides of jihadi fighters. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
One more reason authorities are concerned by that threat against the Mall of America. It's located near Minneapolis in Minnesota, and the terrorist group Al-Shabaab has recruited fighters from the Muslim population in that region before.
In the fight against ISIS, the White House says President Obama is willing to negotiate with Congress on his request for war powers. Elements up for discussion include his proposed 3-year limit on U.S. military action and how American troops will be used. But White House leaders say the president is firmly against any geographic restrictions on where U.S. forces can go after Islamic State militants. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter is leading an unusual conference in Kuwait. He's meeting with top U.S. military, diplomatic, and intelligence experts on the strategy for countering ISIS.
A young girl in northeastern Nigeria blew herself up in a busy market Sunday, killing 4 others and seriously wounding 46. Hospital records show the girl was likely no more than 10 years old. There's been no claim of responsibility for the attack, but Boko Haram has been using young girls as suicide bombers. Just last week, a 16-year-old girl blew herself up in a bus station in the same region.
Jerusalem's mayor, Nir Barkat, helped subdue a terrorist Sunday night after the terrorist stabbed a religious Jew. The entire episode was caught on security camera. Here, the terrorist is seen stabbing his victim, who strikes back with a bag. Barkat was driving by at the time. The mayor, who was wearing a white shirt, and his security guard jumped out of the car and tackled the terrorist, who dropped his knife when the guard drew his gun. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told CBN News Barkat displayed true bravery.
I thought the mayor showed exemplary courage. He and his bodyguard assaulted the terrorists, prevented more injuries. Societies terrorized by terror need to show different kind of courage. They need the courage of governments who will fight terrorism and not knuckle under it, but they also need the courage of individuals to fight terrorism whenever that is required, and I think we saw an example of that yesterday.
This is the latest in a series of lone wolf terror attacks against Jews, mostly in Jerusalem, but also in other areas.
Rudy Giuliani is responding to the firestorm he started when he said he doesn't think President Obama loves the United States. Critics on the left have blasted him for the comment. In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, Giuliani says he made the comment because Obama has argued that America is not exceptional and has criticized America more than other presidents have done. He writes, "I hope and pray that President Obama can rise to the occasion and underscore America's greatness as our history and values merit. If he does so, I will be the first to applaud him." The White House press secretary defends the president, saying Obama used the phrase, "God bless this country we love," during his State of the Union address.
You could be a criminal and not even know it. That's because Congress and the federal government have created literally thousands of laws and regulations with severe penalties, and that means you could be charged with a crime even if you had no idea you did anything wrong. Paul Strand brings us that story.
We're a nation now where politicians and bureaucrats can pass new laws and regulate virtually everything and turn breaking them into some type of criminal offense. And lawyers like Norman Reamer say that's wrong.
We rely on criminal laws to regulate all kinds of social, personal, and economic behavior instead of cabining it to those things which are inherently bad, acts of violence and theft. That's what the criminal law should be for.
It's not surprising we'd be where we are today with many thousands of rules, regulations, and laws, so many that no one has any way of knowing them all. And the problem gets worse because Washington keeps piling criminal penalties on all these thousands of rules, regulations, and laws. Penalties that can land almost anyone, maybe even you, in prison.
Our laws shouldn't make us criminals.
Reamer points out America is incarcerating more people than any other place on earth.
We have over 2 million people in jail. We arrest approximately 14 million people every year. We have over 70 million people with some form of criminal record.
Congress has sort of gotten a habit of over-criminalizing.
Brian Walsh at the Ethics and Public Policy Center understands why the politicians do this.
It polls well. It's something that looks politically strong to be tough on crime. And so being tough on crime is always better than being soft on crime. And that's not a very good principle to go by. There's a lot more nuance that needs to be put in place when we're creating criminalization.
Reamer points out there used to hardly be any federal laws.
We went from a few hundred at the start of the 20th century to close to 5,000 federal criminal provisions now.
And he says that doesn't even begin to count what the huge federal agencies have done, cook up a vast number of regulations that can land you in legal trouble.
Some have said there may be as many as 300,000. So one of the things we have to do is we have to slow down. We have to stop making new criminal laws.
Walsh worries this nation that was so marked by liberty and freedom may soon resemble totalitarian societies. Will we become like those citizens, cowed, fearing almost anything we do is probably forbidden?
When you don't know, when we have so many laws, and the laws are so broad, it chills our conduct. It chills our fundamental rights.
Reamer supports a change coming on Capitol Hill. The House Judiciary Committee will start reviewing any bill that could create a new federal crime to prevent Congress from coming up with still more laws that could put people in prison.
Now, with this rule change, we think we're going to see a lot more of these things being reviewed by judiciary, and hopefully that will slow it down.
A consensus is growing that an American should only have to go to prison if they knowingly committed something that's clearly a crime, not just broken some unknown random rule buried among the many hundreds of thousands that have piled up in recent years. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Kansas could be the first state to outlaw a certain type of abortion. A bill banning the so-called dilation and evacuation procedure passed in the state Senate. One member described it as barbaric and gruesome. Another said it's unimaginable that such a procedure could be used by a medical practitioner. The bill is expected to pass in the Republican-controlled House and gain the signature of Governor Sam Brownback, a strong abortion opponent. These types of abortions are commonly used in the second trimester of pregnancy.
The sexualization of culture has fueled the world's human trafficking problem. That message was delivered at the 4th annual symposium at Regent University's Center for Global Justice this weekend. Speaker and Exodus Cry founder Benjamin Nolot told students that cultural attitudes towards women must change in order to end human trafficking. What's not helping that challenge? Mainstream promotion of movies like 50 Shades of Grey. Nolot told CBN News he's concerned that the sadomasochistic film has won such broad support.
Now the culture seems to be moving in a direction of not just endorsing or promoting the consumption of women on the part of men, but the violent perpetration against women. It's kind of shocking in that sense to think that we have reached this point where, I mean, it seems like there is no conscience at all left whatsoever.
Nolo is currently producing a documentary that examines how our culture has become hyper-sexualized.
Coming up, Transformation, the ministry that uses coffee beans to help drug addicts and criminals start a brand new life.
American missionary Russell Stendhal spoke with CBN News after his release from jail in Colombia last week. A judge ruled there was not enough evidence to prove that Stendhal was guilty of assisting FARC guerrillas in their war against the government.
I was accused by the prosecutor of not being a defined person, of being seen with rebels, being seen with government troops, being seen with right-wing paramilitary forces, being seen with all kinds of undesirable characters. And I explained that that's the exact same thing that the Lord Jesus did in his ministry, but we are all equally in need of the love of God. And it's only as hearts are touched by the love of God that we can have peace. And Colombia desperately needs peace.
You can learn more about Stendhal's outreach to the Colombian rebels and authorities by visiting cbnnews.com.
Millions of Americans get caught up in drug addiction and the cycle of crime, and those who get sucked in often get stuck there.
Prisons have a poor record of helping these people break free, but one ministry is seeing some remarkable success.
Caitlin Burke went to Washington State to bring us this look at the Underground Coffee Project.
It's morning in the Skagit Valley small town of Burlington. And in the basement of this 100-year-old bank building, the Underground Coffee Project begins another day's work. These men come from a different kind of underground: gangs, prison, drug addiction.
Well, I was a heroin addict and a meth cook and a meth addict and a cocaine addict, and I used all of those on a daily basis. And so for 17 years, I was in agreement with evil.
At Underground Coffee, it's about more than just roasting the coffee beans. There's a profound message for the men and how the beans get from this to this.
These cold, hard, ugly beans come into the roaster. The heat changes them and changes their character, changes their appearance, changes their aroma and their flavor.
And that's exactly what happened with Zach. In time, the fire of the Holy Spirit cracked his shell, transforming this once violent, angry man into a humble servant of God.
What is your purpose in life now?
To share good news with people who are suffering and to suffer well with others. Like Jesus would go into people's suffering with them, and even when they're guilty and full of sin, that didn't separate him from them.
The Underground Coffee Project is part of Tierra Nueva, a ministry with a heart for people on the margins. And it all began with the beans. Honduras, 1981. Newlyweds Bob and Gracie Ekblad were deeply moved by the poverty there.
Most of the people there attributed their poverty to God's will. When we began discipling them in farming practices, and they began to have the same results we did, then suddenly God was sort of off the hook in a sense. And that opened the way for us to talk about God differently.
But it became clear the last thing those Honduran peasants wanted was a sermon.
In Spanish, a sermón is the same as a scolding. Most of the people that we work with assume that church is really a place where you go to be reminded of all the things you're not doing.
Bob explains in his book, Reading the Bible with the Damned, how he helped them discover for themselves the truth of God's unconditional love. In time, Tierra Nueva, or New Earth, was born. In 1994, Bob and Gracie moved back to Washington. As the county jail's new chaplain, Bob met Julio.
Tried to get help before, and it's like I've always got turned down because of my criminal background and because I was an active gang member. But Bob never looked at me like that. Tierra Nueva always accepted me with open arms. They told me Jesus loved me no matter what.
But Julio's shell was especially hard to crack. due in part to his gang ties and hardcore drug addiction. For 18 years, he was in and out of jail. Finally, he had nowhere else to turn. A bounty had been put on his head. Julio was on the run.
I was praying and I was asking God, if you could get me out of this one, I'll surrender to you. And the first thing that came into my mind was Pastor Robert and Tierra Nueva.
He immediately got on a bus and headed back to the Skagit Valley.
We baptized him 5 days after he came. We just watched him grow into an amazing sort of man of God. And so I guess I really believe in the importance of perseverance.
I didn't feel I was worthy of God's love from all the bad things that I had done in my past. Like, well, how could God want to use me? And I just kept remembering that Pastor Robert said, remember Paul? He was a crucifier of Christians, and Jesus used him to help people and to reach out to the people.
Tierra Nueva strips away the layers of religion, showing what Jesus' ministry was really like. In humility and unconditional love, they bear witness as modern-day Sauls are transformed into the image of Christ. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Skagit County, Washington.
I've given myself to the Lord, and I've left myself in His hands, and I have trust, and I have been very, very well taken care of.
Up next, she's 100 years young and still going strong. Get her secret to a long life after this. Most of the difficulties with our health come from three simple things: eating the wrong foods, not staying physically active, and not managing stress very well.
But there's one group here in the U.S. that manages to avoid all of those problems, the Seventh-day Adventists. So it's no surprise they live 10 years longer than most Americans. At age 100, Benita Williber still has a healthy mind, body, and spirit.
I've given myself to the Lord, and I've left myself in His hands, and I have trust, and I have been very, very well taken care of.
She's not alone. There's an unusually high concentration of centenarians in her hometown of Loma Linda, California. It's one of only 5 so-called blue zones worldwide, areas where people live the longest. The others are Okinawa, Japan, Korea, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, and Nicoya, Costa Rica. Loma Linda is an hour east of Los Angeles. About 250,000 people live here. The reason they're so healthy is because most of them are Seventh-day Adventists. On average, they live 10 years longer than most Americans. Dr. Larry Beeson has researched this phenomena for the last 50 years.
Adventists have approximately the same proportion of people who die of cancer or heart disease or stroke, but the age that they get diagnosed is much later.
They strongly adhere to the belief of respecting the human body as a temple of the Holy Spirit. That means no alcohol, no tobacco, and following a plant-based diet.
In Christianity, we have the Holy Scriptures. What God said from the beginning, you should eat. He gave us the nuts and the grains and the herbs that He placed in the earth. And He said, you will do better if you subsist on that type of thing.
What has your diet been throughout your life?
Vegetables. My sister liked fruit. Well, I do too, but vegetables had priority, and I like them raw.
Many Adventists, like Benita, are total vegetarians. Others will eat a little dairy, while some occasionally consume fish, and there are those who eat small amounts of poultry and beef. These choices lead to different health outcomes.
The more flesh foods you eat, the more Alzheimer's, the more heart disease, the more cancer, the earlier the death occurs. Where going the other direction, as people move toward the removing flesh food from the diet, there tends to be a delay in the onset of the diseases.
Diet isn't the only factor in these longer lives. Seventh-day Adventists strictly observe the Sabbath. Every Saturday, they rest to recuperate from the week and recharge for the one ahead. Also, to spend time with friends, family, and God. Stuart Hardy, who pastors one of the world's largest congregations, says resting on the Sabbath includes abstaining from electronics.
Any of those things that kind of take you back into work, you try and avoid those things. Now, it's not like it's a rule, but when you think about it, if there's anything that you're involved in during the week, if you go back to that, then you're not really taking a break from it.
I feel that rest is one of the most important things in aging. That if you rest, then you can get up and gallop.
Medical research confirms stress kills.
Science has always kind of had some kind of tension with religion, particularly in contemporary society. So it's great to be able to read something in the scriptures that suggests what we should do, and then science is not only affirming it, but even giving us more specific understanding of why it benefits us so much.
Exercise is also a priority. Throughout her life, Benita was extremely active. Now she only has the strength to walk, which she does every day.
It is subsiding, and that's the way God had intended for people to be, and so I accept that too, even though I don't like it.
Adventists are able to stick to their healthy lifestyle because they're surrounded by others living the same way.
My mother used to keep us in the straight and narrow way by saying, now be careful with the company you keep.
So look to the Seventh-day Adventists who live an average of 10 years longer than the rest of us. They exercise and observe the Sabbath. They avoid alcohol, tobacco, and meat, all within a social network that reinforces that behavior. I'm motivated. Eat more raw vegetables. Learn to love them.
There you go. Back in a moment.
Finally today, Operation Blessing is helping sponsor a kids club in the slums of Cambodia.
Teaming up with other groups, Operation Blessing provides tables and chairs for classes, as well as books and school supplies so these children can get an education and have hope for a brighter future. They also provide sports equipment for the club's soccer program, including jerseys and shoes for all the children involved, and proper attire for the children to participate in Taekwondo competitions. You can find out more about Operation Blessing at their website, ob.org.
And that's it for now on CBN News Watch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.